Welcome to the People Are People podcast, life lessons learned in real time, where we touch on the crazy realities of dealing with human behavior in the workplace. In 2022, I am presenting a series that I simply call the New Manager Series, where we talk about and will focus on a variety of topics every manager needs to know to be successful during and beyond their first year of management. Being a manager is not always a pretty job. It comes with highs and lows that you must prepare yourself to navigate. In this episode, we are going to discuss the perils of micromanaging your team. As a new manager, the approach in which we manage our teams can occur in extremes. Sometimes we allow for a little too much autonomy, or we have a tendency to micromanage our teams. So we can be on either end of the spectrum, particularly as a new manager, because we're trying to find our footing. We're trying to figure out what is the best approach that maybe suits us, makes us feel comfortable. But at the same time, you're trying to find what it is your team needs to also be functional and successful. So what is micromanagement? Micromanagement is a subjective term, in my opinion. I want you to think of it as being a habitual practice by a people manager who requires individuals on their team to share every little detail about what it is they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and when they are going to do it. They often demand to be copied on every email, for example. They may even question the decision that every little thing that the employees on their team are doing. I once managed an associate who told me that she had a manager who wanted to know every time they were leaving their desk to go to the restroom. So let's dive into a little bit more about what's wrong with micromanagement. First of all, it's not a sustainable quality or characteristic for you as a manager. It can be very time consuming to want to keep up with everything everyone on your team is doing at any given time, particularly if you have a large team. Additionally, it can create trust issues between you and your team. They may begin to feel as though because you want to know everything that they are doing, you don't trust them to do the right thing. Kind of like parents and kids, right? Parents and teenagers. Another downfall of micromanagement is that it can inhibit the growth in skill set and bench strength on your team. So for example, if you are trying to take on every little task yourself because you either don't have the time to explain it to someone or you feel like it's easier if you do it yourself, you will forever be weighed down with tasks that someone else could easily execute for you on your behalf and keep the team being, as a functional, cohesive unit. Another con to micromanagement is that it blocks innovation due to fear. So your need to often want to be involved in every little thing that is going on can sometimes inhibit your team coming up with innovative ideas. It can also block you as a leader from coming up with new ideas because, again, you are weighed down and drowning in some of the more menial duties. Another thing that is wrong with micromanagement for you to consider is that it can also be an indicator that there is a greater problem that you need to address. And the problem could be with you. Perhaps you are dealing with some type of traumatic event from your past as someone who reported to a micromanaging leader. You may have someone who is a micromanager in place or in charge of you right now, and that could be what's triggering you to micromanage your own team. No matter the cause, you have to figure out what it is you need to do to address the problem so that it does not lead to the disintegration of how well your team is functioning. Now, I've talked a little bit about, what's wrong with it and why you should not practice micromanagement. But I'm here to tell you that I think there are times when micromanagement is okay. And first of all, if you have an issue with an employee's performance, or perhaps you identify a process gap, that may be the time for you to implement a bit of micromanagement, because micromanagement can actually serve as a root cause analysis process. It can be a component of it in which you're trying to understand every little detail from start to finish of what's happening and why it may be contributing to a process gap or a performance issue in your employees. Managers are actually excellent, objective beings in situations where something is broken, because often, particularly when they're new, they're not very aware of every little intricate detail that occurs along the way. So managers can be an excellent resource to help tease out what the problems are, what is it that's contributing to whatever it is that's broken. Another time in which micromanagement might be okay is the trust factor. Now, I talked about why you don't want to micromanage your employees too much, because it can lead to issues of trust, right? They will feel like you don't trust them and therefore they should not trust you. However, as a manager, as a leader, there will be times when there are truly people on your team that you are managing that you do not trust. And therefore, you may have to micromanage what it is they're doing, how they're executing it, and giving them regular feedback in order to get past, whatever the issue is, to solve whatever is broken. Now, a third reason in which it may be okay for you to micromanage is actually at or during the beginning phases of your time as a new manager. This is a window of time in which you are learning a lot. This is your period of personal growth. So it is absolutely okay that you are micromanaging every little detail in the beginning. The caveat to that is I will encourage you to let your team know that you're doing it. Make sure they understand why you are micromanaging them. Be upfront with them that, hey, I'm new to my role, I'm new to this company, and I really want to get a better understanding for what it is you do, how you do it, where there may be some deficiencies, where the best practices are. So I will likely be micromanaging a lot of things for X period. So if you plan to micromanage every little thing they're going to do for 30 days, make sure they know that. If you're going to target individuals to spend time with in micromanaging what they're doing, make sure everyone knows that. The reason you want to do that is you want people to be aware that you're not picking on them per se, just because you're spending more time with them, but you also want to make sure others know that you're not excluding them for any specific reason. Just that, for example, you might say to them, my schedule is very limited, so unfortunately I can only spend X amount of time each week with individuals. So I am going to be spending time with these people on the team. And that way there's no secret. There's hopefully, you can never guarantee this, what I'm about to say, but hopefully there is no perception that you are favoring anyone just because you're spending more time with them. You just want to make sure that, again, you're being transparent and everyone understands what you're doing and why you're doing it. Again, if you're going to do it for 30 days, let them know you're going to be doing it for 30 days. If you're going to be doing it for 6 months, let them know that you're going to be doing it for 6 months. If you hit that period of time in which you were supposed to be complete and now you're still needing to micromanage for a window of time because you've identified some things, again, make sure everyone is aware of that and share progress with them about what it is you're doing, what it is you've identified. For the people that you're not spending time with, get their input, get their feedback about what it is you've observed and their opinions about it. That way they won't feel left out of the fun of being micromanaged, okay? So let's talk about how to stop micromanaging. So let's say you're not doing it for, positive reasons such as onboarding yourself, but maybe this is just a horrible habit that you've developed as a new manager and you've got to find your way out of it. What I would encourage you to do is to first determine why. Why are you micromanaging these people? Are you insecure about yourself? Something, again, that may have happened in your past. Perhaps you're just insecure in this moment. And again, you're trying to understand, what it is you need to do to be successful. Is there someone who is micromanaging you. Now, I've had this happen to me in the past, and I had to, figure out why I was doing it because it was really frustrating to me. But it was probably my second opportunity, second role as a manager, in which I had someone who would tell me these things that other people that reported to me had taken to her, right? She was one position above my head. Obviously, she was my boss. And so, what was really frustrating about this is that I would come in, and the next thing you know, someone would have had something to say about something that transpired within my team. And it wasn't necessarily a employee issue, but perhaps a broken process that had been identified. And keeping in mind that particular team, unfortunately, we were going through a lot of transition, a lot of reorgs, changes to processes. So many things had been identified as being broken, and so we were steadily, addressing things at a rapid pace. And so meanwhile, I had these people who unfortunately had a prior relationship with my, then boss that would run around that corner and share information. And, I'd come in for my meetings, and during those conversations, I would have to hear about this information that had been brought to her. And so as a result, I found myself trying to micromanage my team for every little thing, right? Because I just did not want everything being carried back to that particular leader. And then there finally came the point where, I just got tired. I got exhausted. And I had to have that hard conversation with my boss at that time. And I was a young manager, mind you. I was in my mid to late 20s. And so I had to say to her, listen, when they're bringing this information to you, are you challenging them on whether or not they've spoken with me? Because, if they're not speaking with me, I can't address the issue. And if I can't address the issue, me coming in here to you and being confronted on it is almost fruitless, right? It just becomes me trying to get back out there and tackle this issue because now it's a priority, right? Because my boss is bringing it to me. Now, I had to say that to her, frankly. It was really frustrating. So I said to her, if you could just send them back to me before they come to you or when they come to you, that would be great. And after that conversation, we didn't have that issue anymore. And, it's unfortunate because you will bump into this. It's like no matter how many ways you explain to people that you have an open door policy, whether that's a virtual open door or a, on-site on-site open door, people are going to just kind of do what they do, and so you do have to be prepared for that. But, my point in that story was just that I had to identify why I was micromanaging people at that point, because it was exhausting. It was hard to sustain it because there were other programs that we were trying to get off the ground and other people on the team who were all in and giving their best, and, me having to step away because someone over here had lit the match on a fire that really wasn't a fire, So, yes, ask yourself if someone is micromanaging you, and is that then leading you to micromanage others? Is there one bad apple that is causing you to micromanage an entire team? Sometimes we have individual players on our team who perform badly, and it can lead you to then question what others are doing. Are other people doing it this poorly? And that's a fair question. You do always want to be aware of what's happening across the board. If the performance gap is a broad gap or if it's limited to an individual. Make sure that you address that micromanaging behavior head on. Identify the pros and cons of the behavior for the short term and long term, and find a solution. You want to make sure that in your analysis of the pros and cons of your micromanaging activity, that you account for your decision and what the impact will be on the morale and productivity of your team. All right. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the People Are People podcast, Life Lessons Learned in Real Time. I am your host, Lexi Mahari. And what I would like to do is just to remind you to please take a moment to follow or like this podcast, wherever you are. Share the podcast with other people who you think might benefit from the podcast. I still remain a small fish in a mighty big pond of podcasters, but with your spreading the word, you will help me grow in no time. Thank you. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next podcast.